When I bought my little lakeside lot 5 years ago, I wasn't chasing luxury, status, or community activities with neighbors who argue over mailbox colors. I was chasing silence. Real silence. The kind where you can hear your own heartbeat and the biggest argument around you comes from two squirrels fighting over a pinecone. I used to sit outside every morning with a cup of coffee and watch the fog roll over the water like a blanket. No traffic, no drama, no random person telling me the length of my grass violates some sacred suburban law. Back then, life was simple, boring even. The kind of boring I prayed for. But boring doesn't last, not where HOAs exist. When a group of neighbors formed an HOA in my area, they invited me to join. Politely, repeatedly, aggressively politely. And every time I said the same thing, "I'm good, thanks." They acted stunned, like I'd just refused free tickets to heaven. But they eventually moved on, or so I thought. Everything changed on one random Tuesday morning when I woke up to a sound I hadn't heard in months. Drilling. Loud, angry drilling that vibrated through the trees like someone was trying to build a secret bunker. At first, I thought it was just someone fixing their porch. But when the drilling didn't stop, not for minutes, not for hours, I knew something was wrong. Curiosity defeated peace. I walked up the ridge behind my property, and the moment I reached the top, I froze. Standing in the clearing across the hill was not a house, not a cabin, not a shed. No, what I saw was a full-sized, luxury mansion rising out of the earth like someone copy-pasted it from a Hollywood neighborhood. 3 stories, glass walls, a pool, a garage big enough to park a small airplane. I stood there so long my coffee went cold. Who in their right mind builds a mansion here? In a quiet community full of retired fishermen and people who think Wi-Fi is a conspiracy. I pulled out my old property map, the one the previous owner had left me. I compared the lines. Then I looked back at the mansion, then the lines again. Something didn't sit right. The mansion was too close, way too close. To calm myself down, I convinced myself it was fine. Maybe I'm misreading the map. Maybe it's just a weird angle. Maybe caffeine is messing with my depth perception. I said every excuse possible, but one thing wouldn't leave my mind. If this thing is on my land, I'm in trouble. If it's on my land, they're in trouble. I hired a professional surveyor that same week. He showed up wearing a reflective vest, a hat that had seen every kind of weather, and a face that told me he had absolutely no interest in small talk. Perfect. He started placing markers, checking poles, reviewing satellite data. He didn't say much. He just walked, measured, walked again, measured again, then stared at the mansion like it had offended him personally. Finally, he took off his hat, wiped his forehead, and said 6 words that made my stomach sink. "You're not going to like this." He pointed at the survey map, then pointed at the mansion. "That garage, your land, the pool. Your land, the entire southern half of that building, absolutely your land." I blinked twice, maybe 3 times. "You mean they built on me?" He nodded. "On you, through you, around you. This isn't a small mistake, buddy, this is major." I tried laughing. It came out sounding like someone choking on a peanut. My peace, the one thing I worked for, paid for, escaped life for, was gone in a heartbeat. And in its place stood a mansion that looked like it cost more than my entire existence. The surveyor patted my shoulder. "You need a lawyer, a good one." But I wasn't thinking about lawyers. Not yet. I was thinking about the one person who would definitely know how this monstrosity ended up half on my land, the HOA president. I had never spoken to her directly. I'd only heard stories. Stories that involved rules, power trips, and a smile sharp enough to cut steel. Before I knew it, I was already walking toward her house. Survey papers in my hand and anger building inside my chest like a storm preparing to rip every tree out of the ground. I didn't know it then, but that walk was the first step in a battle that would turn the entire community upside down. I reached Linda's mansion. The HOA president's official residence, as she called it, just as she was stepping outside onto her porch, holding a glass of iced tea like she was posing for a magazine cover called Suburban Royalty Monthly. Her expression was soft, polite, composed. The kind of smile that made you feel welcomed right up until she stabbed you with paperwork. She spotted me from 30 feet away and did something unsettling. She waved, slow, elegant, like she already knew why I was there and was amused by it. "Good morning," she called out. "Lovely day, isn't it?" Lovely wasn't exactly how I described the situation, but I forced a smile anyway. "We need to talk." Her smile widened as if she were thinking, "Of course you do." "I figured you'd stop by eventually," she said, turning and walking inside. "Come in, let's talk in the sunroom." Now, stepping inside her house felt like walking into a luxury furniture showroom where the cheapest item cost more than my truck. Everything was white, spotless, and screamed I have rules for everything, including how you breathe in this room. She led me to a chair and gestured for me to sit, then crossed her legs and held her iced tea like a queen holding a scepter. "So," she said lightly, "what seems to be troubling you?" I took a deep breath and laid the survey papers on the table between us. "I had a survey done," I explained. "Your construction crew has built more than half of your mansion on my land." Most people, when confronted with something like this, would show shock, confusion, embarrassment, maybe a little panic. Not Linda. She didn't blink, she didn't frown, she didn't even glance at the papers. Instead, she sipped her iced tea with surgical calm. "Oh, sweetheart," she said gently, "that land isn't yours." I stared at her, maybe I misheard. "It's literally on my deed." She waved one hand in the air, brushing the fact aside like she was swatting a fly. "You're not part of the HOA," she said, "so you're not familiar with our boundaries. We actually updated the zoning a few years ago." I leaned forward, "Updated the zoning without the landowner." She smiled proudly. "As the HOA president, I have certain authorities. Our property lines shifted. The community agreed." I blinked. The entire community decided that my land was theirs. "Well," she said, still not looking at the papers, "we used it for our expansion plans, which you would have known if you'd actually joined." I laughed out loud. I couldn't help it. It wasn't a joyful laugh. It was the kind of laugh that escapes when your brain malfunctions. "So you're telling me," I said slowly, "that because I didn't join your HOA, you just took my land?" She didn't even hesitate. "The HOA needed it, and honestly, you weren't using it." "Using it?" "I never knew land ownership worked like gym memberships." "Linda," I said, trying to stay calm, "this isn't some community garden, it's private property, mine." She leaned back casually. "And the HOA decided we needed it more. You should feel honored your land is part of something beautiful now." "Beautiful?" I pictured the massive mansion sitting on my lot, the garage, the pool, the patio, and my jaw clenched. Then she added the line that lit my fuse. "Besides, good luck proving anything. Our lawyer is very expensive." My anger rose like fire in a dry forest. She was mocking me. She wasn't just confident, she was smug. She thought this was over. She thought I'd just walk away and let her keep half a mansion built on my land. So I pushed the survey packet toward her again. "Look at the documents." She finally glanced down for all of 2 seconds. Then she smiled and slid them back toward me like a kindergarten drawing she wasn't impressed by. "These mean nothing," she said. "You can leave now." That was it. That was the moment I realized what I was up against. Not a misunderstanding. Not a confused neighbor. Not an innocent mistake. A power trip wearing a white suit and expensive perfume. I stood up slowly, my hands shaking, not with fear, but with the kind of anger that grows roots deep in your chest. "You're going to regret this," I said quietly. Her smile didn't fade. "Unlikely." I walked out of her house knowing one thing with absolute certainty. She'd chosen the wrong person to steal land from. And she had no idea the war she'd just started. If someone had told me the HOA would go full nuclear because I asked for my land back, I would have laughed. But the universe said, "Watch this," and turned my life into a suburban action movie. The very next morning, I found a bright yellow envelope taped to my front door. It read, HOA Notice of Violation. I wasn't even a member. I opened it expecting something stupid, but no, this wasn't stupid. This was Olympic-level ridiculous. The violation, grass height exceeds community aesthetic standards. My yard was literally short enough for squirrels to complain about the draft. I crumpled the paper, tossed it, and tried to shake it off. But within an hour, 2 more envelopes appeared. One said my trash cans were visible from the street. Another said I had committed a noise violation at 6:14 a.m. At 6:14 a.m., I was asleep dreaming about punching a lawnmower. By noon, 5 more violations had piled up. My mailbox looked like it was vomiting HOA threats. Every envelope felt like Linda whispering, "I own you," from afar. I knew what she was doing. She couldn't scare me with logic or reason, so she was trying to drown me in paperwork. Death by paper cut. But the real explosion came when I stepped outside and saw a brand new sign planted right on my land. A thick metal pole, concrete base, bright red letters that screamed, HOA property, no trespassing. On my land. I stared at the sign for a long moment, then pulled it out of the ground with one angry yank. I expected the battle to end there. Silly me. By the next morning, a bigger sign replaced it. This one looked like it belonged inside a military base. I pulled it out too. The day after that, they upgraded again, this time bolting the sign into the ground with metal brackets. I swear, if I had waited another day, they would have put landmines around it. So I pulled that one out too. That's when things escalated from annoying to insane. That afternoon, I found an envelope in my mailbox, a certified letter, the kind lawyers send when they're bored and want to ruin your day. Inside was a letter from Linda herself, claiming that if I continued interfering with HOA development, they would sue me for damages, disruption, and emotional distress. Emotional distress? From me removing signs from my own land. I sat on my porch staring up at the sky like, is this my life now? Is this the path destiny chose for me? Then something inside me snapped. Not badly, more like when a light bulb suddenly turns on after flickering for hours. I grabbed my phone, searched for the highest-rated property and real estate attorney within 100 miles, and made a call. When the lawyer answered, his voice was quiet and calm, like he'd seen every nightmare an HOA could dish out and wasn't impressed anymore. "Tell me what's going on," he said. I spilled everything, the mansion, the land, the survey, the signs, the fake violations. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then he said the words I desperately needed to hear. "You have a strong case, very strong. This isn't a simple mistake, this is deliberate land encroachment and targeted harassment." I felt my heart beat slow. Finally, someone who understood. "What do I do?" I asked. He replied, "Bring me every document, every violation letter, every photo, and don't talk to them anymore. Let me handle this." I drove to his office with a folder stuffed so thick it looked like a murder case file. He flipped through the papers, nodding slowly, a smile forming like he had just smelled victory. Then he said something that made my jaw drop. "They built on your land without permission. That means legally, everything they built over your boundary might actually belong to you." I blinked. "You mean the pool, the garage, half the mansion?" He nodded. "If it sits on your land, you can claim ownership, but that's a decision we'll make strategically." Suddenly, I wasn't the victim anymore. I was holding a loaded legal bazooka aimed straight at the HOA. He leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Before we move forward," he said, "I need to ask, do you want compensation or do you want the property?" I didn't answer right away. I was too busy imagining walking into Linda's mansion and announcing, "I'll be using my half of the living room today. Thanks." But the war wasn't over. It was just getting started. And the HOA had no idea the storm I was about to unleash. The morning of the hearing didn't feel like a courtroom day. It felt like the final round of a long war, silent, cold and humming with the kind of tension that made the walls feel alive. As Daniel entered the courthouse, people actually stepped aside, whispering like they already sensed something bigger than a property dispute was about to explode. Karen walked in seconds later with the smug confidence of someone who believed the system belonged to her. Her heels clicked like a countdown timer. Behind her were HOA board members carrying binders, folders, maps, props meant to intimidate. But Daniel had something they didn't know about yet, something that would flip the entire room upside down. Inside the courtroom, the judge looked tired but sharp, the kind of man who had seen people lie with perfect smiles. As everyone took their seats, he spoke sharply. "Let's begin. This is the case of Daniels versus Lakeside Haven HOA and Karen Fielding." Karen tilted her chin upward like she was starring in her own documentary. Daniel simply breathed. Karen's attorney started first, and he was good, smooth, aggressive, and arrogant enough to match his client. "Your Honor," he said confidently, "this is an open and shut case. My client legally purchased the land, the HOA had rightful jurisdiction, and Mr. Daniels is attempting to exploit a clerical misunderstanding to claim what he does not own." The judge nodded slowly. "Show your evidence." Karen's side displayed maps, purchase papers, HOA annex filings, and photos of the property. The mansion, the gate, the signs. It all looked intimidating. The courtroom even murmured in Karen's favor for a moment. But Daniel's attorney let them finish everything, every word, every exhibit, without flinching. Because he knew what was coming. When it was their turn, Daniel's attorney stood up quietly and placed one thin folder on the desk. "No binders. No theatrics. Just truth." "Your Honor," he began, "before I present any documents, may I ask the court clerk to confirm something?" The judge raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." The attorney nodded at the clerk. "Please run a title verification for Parcel 11B, filed 27 years ago under the Daniels Family Trust." Karen's attorney laughed, actually laughed. "Your Honor, we've already verified ownership." The judge cut him off. "If he's requesting verification, we'll do it." The courtroom went still. The clerk typed, clicked, paused, then frowned. "That's strange," she whispered. The judge leaned forward. "What do you see?" The clerk looked up, confusion turning into something like shock. Parcel 11B wasn't transferred. It's still under the Daniels Trust, and the boundaries, they're significantly larger than the HOA filings show. Karen's attorney froze. Karen blinked, then smiled a shaky smile. "That must be an error," she whispered loudly. The judge motioned, "Bring it here." The clerk walked it to him. The judge stared for a long, heavy moment. Then he looked up, straight at Karen. "According to county records, Ms. Fielding, your mansion, your private access road, and half the community facilities are entirely built on Mr. Daniels' land." A long, stunned silence swallowed the room. Karen's lawyer scrambled. But the HOA withdrew. "Withdrew illegally," the judge snapped. "They filed annexation documents without the rightful owner's signature." Karen's face drained of color. Daniel finally raised his head, not in triumph, just in acceptance. His attorney continued calmly. "Your Honor, we also have the original survey, notarized signatures from the Daniels family trust holders, and a video recording from the previous surveyor stating that boundary markers were intentionally replaced." Karen shot up. "Lies, that video is fabricated." The attorney didn't flinch. "Your Honor, the surveyor is present today. Shall we call him in?" The judge nodded. "Bring him." The door opened, and in walked an elderly man with shaky hands but a steady voice. He pointed directly at Karen. "That woman bribed one of my juniors to shift the markers. I refused. The next week I got reported to the county for incompetence. I lost my job." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The judge didn't waste time. His gavel struck like thunder. "This court rules in favor of Mr. Daniels. Immediate cessation of HOA control over his property, immediate injunction on Ms. Fielding's occupancy of the mansion, and a full investigation into fraudulent filings. Karen whispered, "No, no, no," like the world was collapsing around her. Because it was. But the judge wasn't done. "Ms. Fielding, I strongly suggest you prepare for criminal proceedings." Daniel didn't celebrate, didn't smirk. He simply exhaled, finally, because the war he never wanted had just taken a turn. But he knew it wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat. And the storm she unleashed next was far worse than anything he'd prepared for. Karen didn't leave the courthouse like a defeated person. She didn't cry, didn't collapse, didn't even argue with the deputies escorting her away for questioning. No, she walked out smiling. A tight, eerie, calculated smile. Daniel saw it, and he knew instantly. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. That night, as Daniel drove back to the land that was finally, legally his again, he expected silence, peace, closure. Instead, the mansion on the hill, Karen's illegal palace, was lit up like a festival. Music thumped. Cars lined the driveway. HOA members walked in carrying champagne. It looked like a celebration. A celebration on his land. Daniel stepped out of his truck slowly, staring at the glowing windows. He heard laughter, Karen's laughter, ringing from inside like she owned the night. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You won one round, but I built my entire life on your land. I'm not leaving." "Karen." Daniel didn't reply. He drove down to his cabin instead. But even from there, he could see the mansion shining through the trees, huge and arrogant, like it was mocking him. He barely slept. Morning came with chaos. HOA trucks blocked the entrance again. Except this time, they weren't there to stop him. They were there to escort moving vans. 4 massive moving trucks stood in line outside the mansion. HOA board members shouted instructions. Workers hauled out furniture, boxes, paintings, statues, everything that belonged to Karen. Daniel walked up the dirt road slowly. "What is this?" he asked the man directing the trucks. The board member didn't even make eye contact. Karen ordered emergency relocation. She's moving all her possessions out before the sheriff's department shows up with the eviction notice. "But she still hasn't left," Daniel asked. The man smirked. "Oh, she left town for the weekend to clear her head. But this," he pointed toward the trucks, "this is her message. She thinks the mansion is worthless without her things." Daniel stared at the massive house towering above them. Suddenly, the front door burst open. A worker ran out coughing violently, waving his arms. "Gas leak, get out, everyone out." People scattered, alarms started beeping. The board member grabbed Daniel's arm. "We need to leave, it's not safe." But Daniel didn't move. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. The worker stumbled forward. "It's no accident, the valves inside were broken off. Someone wanted the place filled." Daniel felt ice in his veins. Karen didn't just walk away. She booby-trapped her own mansion. Minutes later, the fire department arrived. Police cruisers lined the road. A hazmat team entered. Daniel watched from the driveway, heart pounding. A captain approached him after an hour. "You're Daniel." "Yes." "You were wise not to go inside. The gas buildup was dangerously high. Any spark, any static, even a wrong step, and that whole structure would have gone up." Daniel swallowed. "Do you think it was sabotaged?" The captain nodded grimly. "Absolutely. Someone wanted to destroy that house before you could legally take possession." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "Karen." The captain gave him a hard look. "We can't say that until we investigate, but whoever did it knew exactly where to tamper." HOA members whispered. Some blamed the workers, others blamed Daniel. A few whispered the unspoken truth. Karen did it. Hours later, after the house was declared safe to enter, The police allowed Daniel to walk through the mansion with them. He stepped inside and froze. Every inch of the interior was vandalized. Destroyed. Ruined. Walls smashed. Floorboards torn up. Cabinets ripped apart. Light fixtures shattered. Like someone had spent hours tearing down every memory, every expensive detail, every luxury piece they'd once boasted about. At the center of the living room, carved into the marble floor with something sharp, were 5 chilling words. "You will never win." Daniel stared at the message, breath trembling. He hadn't expected the house back, but he hadn't expected this. A detective beside him murmured, "This wasn't anger, this was strategy. She didn't want you to have anything." Karen had turned the mansion she illegally built into a weapon. By evening, Daniel sat outside the cabin, staring at the dark silhouette of the ruined mansion on his land. His phone buzzed again, another unknown number. "Did you like the gift?" Daniel tightened his jaw. But before he could respond, another message came. "Round 2 starts tomorrow. You're not ready." Daniel stared at the glowing screen as the trees rustled around him. Karen had lost in court. But now she was playing a different game. A dirty, unpredictable personal game. And Daniel could feel it. The real war had finally begun. The next morning started with something Daniel hadn't felt in weeks. Silence. No HOA trucks. No shouting guards. No Karen storms brewed in the air. Just silence. But it didn't last long. At 7:14 a.m., a black SUV rolled onto the gravel road, slow, official, deliberate. 2 people stepped out wearing county badges. One of them, a stern-looking woman with a clipboard, called out, "Daniel Rivers." Daniel nodded cautiously. "That's me." She handed him a thick envelope, at least 50 pages inside. "This was filed late last night," she said. "Emergency redevelopment plan by the Lakeside Haven HOA." Daniel blinked. Redevelopment plan, filed after the court hearing. He opened the envelope. The words hit him like a punch. Proposal for mandatory land repurposing and community takeover due to environmental hazard. What does this even mean?" he asked. The inspector adjusted her glasses. "It means they're claiming your land, your entire lot, is unstable and environmentally unsafe. They're trying to classify it as uninhabitable. If approved, you'd be forced to vacate." Daniel stared at her. "Based on what evidence?" She sighed. "They submitted something big with it, something interesting." She flipped through her own copy and pulled out a large folded page. "This." Daniel unfolded it. His heart almost stopped. It was a blueprint. A detailed map. Not of the HOA. Not of the community. Of his land. Except this version showed a massive expansion project. Luxury shops, a private lake deck, a clubhouse, a tennis court, and right at the center, on the exact spot her mansion sat. HOA Presidential Estate, Phase 1 completed. Daniel looked up stunned. Phase 1 completed, so she planned all of this the whole time. The inspector nodded. This wasn't some accidental boundary mistake. She designed her mansion thinking she already owned your land. Daniel stepped back, his mind raced. Karen never expanded the boundaries. She never updated zoning. She had planned this for years. She had built her mansion with full confidence that the community, her community, would eventually force Daniel out one way or another. The inspector continued, "We're here to evaluate, but I'll be honest. Something feels off. We're still required to check the property, though." They walked toward the destroyed mansion. The police tape fluttered in the morning breeze. Inside, the sun illuminated the destruction Karen had left behind. The inspector crouched and examined the destroyed gas valves. These were tampered with intentionally, very dangerous. Daniel folded his arms. "They're trying to make my land look unsafe." "Trying," she said, "more like setting you up. She pointed at a crack in the floor. This was forged. Someone took a sledgehammer to this concrete. Daniel felt his chest tighten. So the HOA filed that emergency report using these fake damages as evidence. She nodded, and if we sign off on it, your land becomes unusable. Daniel could feel Karen's fingerprints all over this plan. She didn't care about losing in court. She didn't care about owing money. She cared about one thing: winning. By any means. The inspector stood up and whispered, "I have to do my job, but I'll say this unofficially, watch your back. Someone's trying really hard to erase you from this map." The SUV drove away. Daniel stood in the ruined mansion, staring at the blueprint in his hands. Every line, every detail, every mark was clear as day. Karen had designed this community to swallow his land whole. But something bothered him. Something didn't fit. Why would she file emergency redevelopment documents the same night the judge ruled against her? Why set up fake damages when the case was already lost? Was this desperation? Or something bigger? His thoughts were interrupted by a sound. Footsteps. Slow, crunching the debris behind him. Daniel turned sharply. A man in a suit stood in the doorway, calm, confident, and disturbingly familiar. "You must be Daniel," he said smoothly. Daniel tensed. "Who are you?" The man stepped forward, offering a hand Daniel did not take. "Name Craig Dalton," he said. "I'm the HOA's new attorney." "New?" Daniel asked. "As of when?" Craig smiled. "As of midnight. Karen hired me after your little courtroom victory." Daniel felt chills run down his spine. Craig walked around the room, inspecting the damages like he was touring an art exhibit. "Beautiful house," he murmured. "Shame what happened to it." Daniel stepped closer. "What do you want?" Craig turned, smile widening unnaturally. "I'm here to deliver a message," he said. "Karen may be out of town, but she's still in control." Daniel's jaw clenched. "She has no control," the court ruled. Craig chuckled. "Courts end cases, not wars, and Karen plays long games, Daniel." He pointed at the blueprint Daniel was holding. That's just her opening move." Daniel stared at him. "Tell her I'm not scared." Craig walked toward the exit, tapping the doorframe once. "Oh, you should be," he said quietly, "because Karen doesn't lose." He stepped outside. "And tomorrow, something big is coming." Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. Craig smiled one last time. "Be ready." Then he walked away, leaving Daniel alone in a broken mansion. On land, everyone was suddenly fighting for. I barely slept that night. Craig's warning kept replaying in my head like a ticking clock. "Tomorrow, something big is coming." Those words rattled around in my skull until morning crept in like a slow-moving storm. And storms have a way of announcing themselves. At exactly 8:03 a.m., I heard an engine. Not a car. Not a truck. A convoy. When I stepped outside, my jaw dropped. 5 HOA trucks. 2 county vehicles. 1 flatbed carrying construction supplies. And because Karen never did anything halfway. A bulldozer. A freaking bulldozer. I shouted, "Hey, what the hell is this?" The convoy didn't even slow. They rolled down the dirt road like they owned it. And right behind them, stepping out of a black SUV like a queen returning to her throne. Karen. White suit. Sunglasses. A confidence so thick it practically glowed. She smirked when she saw me. Well, she said. "Good morning, Daniel, ready to surrender your little patch of ground." I walked straight toward her. "You're trespassing again." She tilted her head. "Not for long." Before I could respond, Craig Dalton walked up beside her, carrying a briefcase like he was delivering doom. "Daniel," he said coolly, "we're commencing Phase 2. "Phase 2 of what?" I snapped. Karen stepped forward, holding out a stack of papers. "This," she said proudly, "is a temporary emergency order granting the HOA full operational control of your land while the environmental investigation is underway." I ripped through the pages quickly, heart pounding. "This says my land is a hazard zone," I said. "You know that's a lie." Craig smiled. "Well, the blueprint and damages made it very convincing." "You sabotaged it yourselves." Karen didn't even flinch. "Prove it." My hands clenched into fists. "This order isn't signed, it's not valid." She smirked. "It will be. The county representative is on his way as we speak." And right then, as if the universe had been cued, a dusty white county SUV turned onto the road. The inspector from yesterday stepped out, and her face said everything. "Daniel, I tried to stop it," she said quietly. "They pushed it through anyway." Karen snapped her fingers. "Gentlemen, proceed." The bulldozer's engine roared alive. And in that instant, I realized what her plan was. She wasn't trying to claim my land anymore. She was trying to destroy everything on it, so I'd have nothing left to fight for. The inspector tried one last time. "We haven't finished the evaluation." Craig cut her off. "The emergency order supersedes your timeline." The bulldozer began rolling toward the ruined mansion. My land. Faster, louder, angrier. I ran forward. "Hey, stop that machine." Karen stepped directly in front of me, blocking my path. "You can keep your court win," she whispered with a cold smile, "but you won't keep a single brick." Behind her, the bulldozer hit the front steps of the mansion. Wood splintered. Glass exploded. The entire front facade collapsed inward. HOA members cheered. Karen smiled wider. "Do you see?" she asked. "This is what power looks like." My chest tightened. Rage flooded up my throat. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, could barely breathe as the machine continued tearing the structure down piece by piece. But then, a sheriff's cruiser came speeding down the hill. Fast, aggressive. It skidded to a stop behind the HOA convoy, and an officer jumped out with his hand on his holster. "All operations stop now," he barked. Karen turned pale for the first time. The sheriff walked straight to me. "Daniel, are you okay?" he asked. I nodded barely. They're destroying everything." He turned on Karen like a storm. "You lied on official documents. You fabricated environmental damages, and you submitted last-minute redevelopment claims without state approval." Craig stepped forward. "Sheriff, if you'll allow." "Quiet," the sheriff snapped. "You're both under investigation." Karen's mouth dropped open. "But this is an HOA matter," she yelled. "No," the sheriff said coldly. "This is fraud, property destruction, and obstruction of a county inspection." The bulldozer finally shut down. The entire road went silent. Karen's hands began shaking, barely visible but no longer masked by her arrogance. The sheriff pointed at the mansion. "This destruction is illegal, and until the investigation ends, everything stops. No work, no movement, no HOA involvement." Karen tried to speak, but the sheriff cut her off again. "And Karen, you need to come with us." Her mouth fell open. No, I didn't do anything wrong." The sheriff didn't argue. 2 deputies walked toward her. She stepped back. "Craig, do something." But even Craig looked shaken. The deputies gently took Karen by the arms. "No," she screamed. "You can't take me. This is MY community, my land, MY plan." As they escorted her to the cruiser, she twisted around to glare at me. Her hair wild, her sunglasses gone, her voice shaking with rage. "This isn't over, Daniel," she screamed. "I will destroy you before this ends." The door slammed shut. The cruiser drove off with her inside. HOA members stood frozen. Craig stared silently. The bulldozer operator shut off the machine. For the first time in months, the land was quiet. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt something else, because the sheriff had said one last thing before he left. "We'll talk soon, Daniel. There's something we found in that mansion you need to see." And he'd lowered his voice when he added, "Something Karen never wanted you to discover." My stomach dropped, because if Karen had gone this far already, whatever she was hiding, it was going to be much, much worse. When the sheriff told me they'd found something inside Karen's ruined mansion, I thought he meant documents, maybe forged signatures, maybe hidden HOA files. I wasn't prepared for what it actually was. By noon, I was standing inside the shattered remains of Karen's presidential estate, surrounded by deputies placing numbered tags everywhere. The mansion looked less like a home and more like a crime scene. The sheriff approached me, expression tight. "Daniel," he said, "what you're about to see changes everything." He led me through the broken hallway, over shattered marble, past the caved-in staircase Karen's bulldozer had hit earlier. We stopped at a section of wall where the plaster was torn open, exposing insulation and wiring. The sheriff shined a light inside. At first, it looked like just another damaged section of wall. But then I saw it. A door. A narrow, hidden door between two studs, so perfectly disguised that if the bulldozer hadn't cracked the wall, nobody would have ever noticed it. "What is that?" I whispered. "Come see," the sheriff said. Two deputies forced the thin door open, and we stepped inside what I can only describe as a secret office. A small room, maybe 8 feet wide, with a single desk, filing cabinets, and a locked metal safe bolted into the floor. Dust hung in the air like the room hadn't been touched in months. The sheriff spoke softly. "We found documents here showing that Karen's boundary expansion wasn't just illegal, it was part of a bigger scheme." He gestured to the table. Papers were spread out everywhere, each one more damning than the last. HOA funds transferred to private accounts. Bribes listed as maintenance fees. Construction invoices for her mansion paid using community money. Emails between Karen and contractors discussing quiet acquisitions of neighboring land, mine included. I felt my chest tighten. "Sheriff, she planned to take over the entire ridge." "Not planned," he corrected. "She was already doing it." My mind raced. Every confrontation, every lie, every smug smile. Karen hadn't just crossed a boundary line, she'd engineered an entire operation to seize the land around her piece by piece. And I was the only one who stood in her way. But the sheriff wasn't done. "Daniel," he said, "there's something else in the safe." He nodded at a deputy, who cracked the lock open with tools. When the metal door finally swung open, I expected money, land deeds, maybe hidden cash. I didn't expect what they actually pulled out. A red binder, thick, heavy, old. Stamped with a label. Project Haven Master Plan. I opened it carefully. The first page made my blood run cold. Objective, full HOA ownership of Ridgeline properties by 2026. Procedure, remove resistant landowners by legal pressure, fabricated violations, and strategic environmental claims. I stared at the words, my stomach twisting. She hadn't just tried to steal my land. She had a step-by-step manual on how to erase people like me. The sheriff placed a hand on my shoulder. "This is more than property fraud. This is conspiracy, racketeering levels of planning." Before I could respond, a deputy rushed over. "Sheriff, you need to see this." We followed him to the back corner of the secret room. There, folded neatly behind the safe, was a large envelope. Inside it, a deed. Not my deed. A forged one. One that showed the land had been transferred to the HOA 2 years ago, signed with a fake version of my signature. I staggered back. She forged a deed to my land. The sheriff nodded grimly. She built her mansion believing she could force the county to accept this forged deed once her plan was complete. I felt sick, angry, violated. Everything suddenly made sense. Her confidence, her calmness in court, her arrogance even when she lost. Karen didn't think she was going to win. She thought she had already won. And then, her voice echoed in my head, screaming as she was arrested. "This is my land." She wasn't lying. In her twisted mind, the land was hers. The sheriff took a deep breath. "Daniel, she's not getting out of this one. With the documents we found, the DA is filing charges. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy, misuse of HOA funds, environmental tampering, and destruction of private property." I swallowed hard. "What happens now?" The sheriff nodded toward a box they'd sealed and labeled. Now we make sure none of this ever happens again. And Daniel." He offered a rare small smile. "You finally get your land back." For the first time in months, I felt something I'd forgotten existed. Relief. Not the kind that comes suddenly, but the slow, warm kind that rises in your chest like dawn. As I stepped outside the ruined mansion, the wind moved through the trees. The sun hit the land in a way it hadn't in a long time. My land. Free again. And Karen. Well, she was facing more jail time than she had HOA rules, and that's saying something. But the sheriff wasn't finished. "One more thing, Daniel," he said. "The county decided something today." I turned. "What?" He smiled. "They're dissolving the HOA permanently." I blinked completely. "Completely," he said. "Karen's leadership poisoned everything. This place needs a reset." I laughed, a real genuine laugh. After months of chaos, fights, threats, lawsuits, bulldozers, it was over. The land was mine. The HOA was gone. And Karen, well, she'd be spending the next few years explaining her leadership style to a judge. As I walked back to my cabin, I whispered to the trees, the mountains, the ridge. "I'm home. And this time, no one was going to take it away again." You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.